Yeah, that must be a little bit ahead. There it is. Okay, say some Tehillim. The midah that a person's supposed to exercise at a time like that is the midah of nosei bolim chavero, to try and feel people's pain. It's an impossible task with the amount of people, just over 800 soldiers killed, in this war. And I learned when I first came to Eretz Yisrael in Yeshivat HaKotel, I came just after the first Lebanon war. And there were a few boys from the yeshiva who were killed in that war, and I came like it was still very raw. That Erev Rosh Hashanah, they went to the Kvarim, and a person has to try to think. That's what we learned from Moshe Rabbeinu. I saw this mimer from Vuri Weisblum. He's the mashgiach in Nachal Salvim in Haifa. And he said the Torah tells us only one thing about Moshe Rabbeinu, that he tried to feel the pain of those around him and do what he could to ease it. But we also have to do, so the shir should be Le'ilim Nishmasam, of all of them, and we should try to live a life that justifies the sacrifice that was made. The Talmud Rebbe, just on Parshas Shmini, mentioned an interesting thing. He was told by someone that there was once a Shalom Zachar on Parshas Shmini. Oh, did I do it? No. Yeah, no, I just want to check. Oh, I'm going to say it. And the Lev Simcha, the Ger Rebbe, not the previous one, the father of the current one. So he came into the Shalom Zachar and he asked the question. It says that Moshe Rabbeinu came back and he saw, right, that this korban was burnt, that he didn't feel should have been burnt. Oh, and he, right, V'hinei Soraf, he came in and he asked Aaron, why did you do this? So the Lev Simcha asked, where was Moshe Rabbeinu? He was in charge of the Avodah during all these days, including on Yom HaShmini. So he said, it must be that he went to the Levayev, not of Avihu. Right? That's he says he couldn't be Matame himself, but it would make sense that he would go to Levaya. He wasn't commanded not to leave Ol Moed. And there we see that he had to transition between the incredible sadness of the Levayev, not of an Avihu, who he described when he told Aaron, these are Bikrovai Kodesh, these are people of a greater level than us. And then to go back to the Mishkan and go back into the Avodah of the Chanukas HaMishkan. It's the big Avodah. Okay, so here we have the Parshas that deal with Tzaras, that deal with the Metzora. Fascinating that so many huge aspects of Yiddishkeit are referred to by one letter or something in the Torah, and here we have so much ink on the Metzora, the different types of Tzaras, in all its different variations, the process of the beginning of the process, the ending of the process, etc. So, and then sometimes it frustrates us that we say, okay, but we don't have tzaras nowadays. Now, first of all, it seems that the reason Hashem doesn't give us tzaras nowadays, one reason I was told, is that we wouldn't be able to handle it. It was a very, very traumatic process to have to go through tzaras, and with the amount of lashon hara we say, we would all be. It's something. It was a very humiliating process. It was a very public process, right? That was there. Nonetheless, I think I saw brought down the Chazon Ish said that if somehow it did happen nowadays, a person would be obligated to go through the process, and it can be used though, taken for Avera Bichlal. Okay, the Nesiv Shalom brings from earlier sources that the word Metzora means Metzora, meaning someone that he has exhaust fumes of Ra. It means that he's so bad that the bad is inside of him, and the Lashon Hara is simply those fumes. Right? Dentists like to say that sometimes they can detect an internal illness that a person has before he knows it. It can be sometime even from the person's breath or something happening in his gums, that can be an evidence of some kind of internal disease which is going on. So here, the Lashon Hara is like the tip of the iceberg of what's happening with this person. So we can learn from this process and see the process of tshuva and see how a person is supposed to be able to go through this, and therefore we have to go through similar processes with any of our Averas with the tools that we have now. That's what we're going to be looking at when we find it. We'll start with an interesting riddle kind of that the Talmud Rebbe started with. There's something brought down by the Rishonim, it's brought down by Balitosus, Rabbeinu Bechaye, the Rokeach, that it's a powerful shmira, a protection to say the 11 psukim in Tanakh that start with nun and end with nun. Okay, many Sidurim printed on Motzoi Shabbos. I used to go sometime for a bracha or eitzah from Rabbi Foel Levin Zatzal, the son of Rav Aryeh Levin, the famous Yerushalmi Tzaddik. He used to give people these 11 psukim on a card to say. And again, there's all sorts of deep stuff about the letter nun, why those psukim. But the first pasuk is Negat Tziras Kisiya Ba'adam V'huva El HaKohen. Okay, that is the first. When a person has this blemish, this illness of tzaras, and he is brought to the Kohen. So it seems very strange in a pasuk that's a set of 11 that's supposed to do positive things for you. The first thing would be this idea of the Negat Tzaras. So we have to see how, in actuality, like everything in Torah, the goal is to help people become more, become better. Like Rav Chaim Friedlander phrases it so nicely, says, the punishments HaKadosh Baruch Hu give are never revenge, they're tikkun, they're repair. Okay, and that's very important to remember. So this pasuk that we have in Tazria, right? Adam kiya ba'or basaro se'eso sapachas o baheres, right? These different types of tzaras. It says, v'huva el hakohen. He is brought to the Kohen. V'huva el Aaron hakohen. He is brought to Aaron hakohen. O el echad mibonov hakohenim. Or to one of his sons who is a Kohen. It's an interesting phraseology. Again, the Talmud Rebbe pointed out that throughout Vayikra, there are many things that say El Aaron vel Bonav, El Aaron vel Bonav. Here it says El Aaron HaKohen, O El Echad Mibonav HaKohenim. Okay, we'll see what that represents in a second. So the Nesiva Shalom says that the word Adam implies a person on a very high level. It says the Zohar Kodesh talks about the different words we have for a person, Adam, Ish, etc. Adam, he says on top, is on top of the level. So this is a person who has levels in spirituality and ruchnius, and he has something which is deep inside of him. Ba'or b'soro. It's deep inside. And what this means is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is helping him because he has something bad inside. He has Ra, and he's given this sign that you have something inside of you that you didn't pay attention to, that you didn't notice. And that's one of the challenges to a person on a higher level. It's hard for him to realize sometimes that he may have fallen in something like Lashon Hara, or the arrogance that leads to Lashon Hara, and things like that. So therefore, he needs help. And that's why we find in the Pasuk, V'huva el HaKohen. He is brought to the Kohen. Okay, this isn't what we find like when it talks about the tzaras that it can appear in a house later in Metzora. So it talks about the man who has the house going to the Kohen. Right? It says that he goes to the Kohen and he says, Kenega niyar li babayis. It doesn't say V'huva el HaKohen. He's brought to the Kohen. So here, a variety of Sfarim say that this shows that he needs other people to bring him. Right? Other people need to explain to him that this is really a siman of a problem you have. I'll just give a Mar Mokum in Rav Asher Weiss's Minchas Asher. One of his pieces on these Parshas deals with the question, is a person obligated to go to the Kohen to check his blemish to see if it's tzaras? And if so, if he has tzaras, is he obligated to go through the tahara process? He finds that there's a real machlokus among the Rishonim. He leaves it kind of as a tzarech iyun. Right? It's a very strange scenario. According to some Rishonim, okay, I've got this weird thing. I don't feel like going to the Kohen. I don't want to. Is he obligated or not? Or, once the Kohen has described him as a Metzora, and he's living out there outside the Machne going Tomei, he says, this isn't so bad. And he decides he wants to stay with it. I want to go back and bring the question if you're obligated or not. But here, right, if you have good friends, so they are supposed to help you realize your problem and bring you to the Kohen. Okay, now this idea of Aaron HaKohen o Echad Mibonav HaKohenim, this represents, Shem Shmuel says, and others, the people who are like Talmidim of Aaron, meaning translating it into our reality. A person nowadays can have an Avera, can become aware of his Avera. His friends can help him become aware of his problem. So we don't go through the exact process of the Metzora of going to Aaron HaKohen, or let's say Bonav HaKohanim, for those things. But Aaron represents the Midah of Chesed. Okay? So the Nesir Shalom says the idea of you go to the tzaddik who's an Ish Chesed. Kohanim represent Chesed. Mibonav HaKohanim is what we call in Pirkei Avos, Talmidov Shel Aaron, those who follow in the ways of Aaron. So here we find an interesting thing. This is going to be, like we said, a very brutal process. A person who's an Adam, who's very respected, has got to go to this Kohen. Sometimes the Kohen could be much less learned than he is. A fascinating halacha in this is, you can have a big Talmud Chacham who's learned all of Taharas with all of the Mefarshim, and a person has something on his arm, he comes to his Talmud Chacham, he says, do you think this is, the tzadi word? You think this is it? And he looks, he says, yeah, definitely. Is he Tomei? No. Right? Because he's not a Kohen. He has to come to a Kohen. Let's say the only Kohen around is a real ignoramus. And the Talmud Chacham has to explain to him. He says, listen, Mr. Cohen, you don't know much about this. You see that thing on his arm? He says, yeah, what's that? No, listen, that's what's called saras, okay? Saras. And I'm telling you, it's the real thing. And therefore, you have to say that he is Tomei. Okay? He is Tomei. No, not he is Tomei. You tell him, you are Tomei. I'll write it out for you. And he says Tomei, and that's the only way it happens. Okay? The Kohen has to say this. And there are times where Chazal say we delay the Kohen declaring him Tomei, right, for different reasons. If it's, involving a chuppah, if it's involving other things, we can't delay it because it doesn't happen until the Kohen says it. And by coming to the Kohen, he's coming to get help. This is not just a technical thing. This is not a Chumash type of dermatologist. The Kohen, being the Ish Chesed, is here to help him. And this is what the Sforno tells us the process is going on. Okay, the Sforno says in Tazria Yud Gimel Hey, says, V'ra'ohu HaKohen. The Kohen sees what he has. Gzeres HaKosuv, the Sforno says, this is what the Torah has decreed, Shelo tiyeh tumas negorim v'tarason el al pi Kohen. This can only be done, as we said, through a Kohen. Ki sifsei Kohen yishmeru das. That's one of the duties of the Kohen, to pass on and protect certain levels of understanding. V'yoru l'menuga l'fashresh b'maisav yispal al atzmo. The Kohen is not here just to take a look and say, yeah, you're Tomei, into the house, etc. He's coming to guide him how to look into what might be wrong, and to daven for himself, v'yispal gama Kohen olav. And the Kohen is also supposed to be davening for him. Meaning this is a tremendous partnership, this is coming. He's coming to someone for chesed. It's not that the Kohen is there to dish out the punishment and humiliate him. He's saying, you're Tomei, out, and he has to go out there publicly. He says, Bilade zos bi'asapim kol nega. Okay, also, this the Kohanim, he says, will get used to seeing it and they'll be able to get things clear and have it done well. But this idea that the Kohen is coming to help the person help himself and to show partnership and chesed with the person is very key. So that is what a person is supposed to be doing now as well. The Kohen, in the Hasidic Sforim, they move that on to the idea of the tzaddik, let's say. A tzaddik who's there, whose primary role is to do chesed and to help people. V'huva, right, or perhaps the equivalent echad mibonav hakohanim is what's called the chabura, what's called other Jews. Right? He brings down, he says that Hasidim say, it says in the Mishnah, mikveh Yisrael Hashem, right? So he says these are three ways that a person can become tahor: through the mikveh, through Yisrael, through connecting with other Jews, and through Hashem, through connecting to Hashem, especially through learning Torah. Okay, so this is what a person is supposed to do. And he has an initial talking with his friends, with his chabura who bring him. Right? Chazal say, Daiga b'levish yisicheno, you speak out your problems to others. And then he's brought to the Kohen, who it's true, if he has tzaras, he has to send him out of the machane. And everybody knows he's not coming to work, he's not taking his kids to school, he's out there, He's going around announcing Tomei Tomei so that nobody should be right. And you can imagine how many kids want to go see the Metzora walking around going Tomei Tomei. They didn't have phones to take pictures then, but you can imagine all the films it would be of this poor guy, right, doing this. So he gets kapara through this Yisurim and Bizayon. He thinks, he has a lot of time to think of what I did. I separated people from each other by Lashon Hara. I looked down on other people. And now look at me in the state that I'm in. It's supposed to get him to think in that way. But, again, it's supposed to be done with kindness. It's supposed to be done with chesed. It's supposed to be done with hope, because eventually he becomes tahar. And that's the goal of this whole process. Now, the Rambam says a fascinating thing in, I forget which halacha it was. He says that if you have a person, let's say what's called tumas meis, the tumah of coming in contact with the dead. So you have one person who's tahar because he never came in contact with the dead. You have another person who's tahar because he did come in contact with the dead. He went through the process of having the waters of the Parah Aduma sprinkled on him on the third day and the seventh day. The Rambam says that second one is more tahar than the first one. It's a very strange thing. How can you be more tahar? He says because the first one was simply tahar by default. He didn't do anything. A person who was tameh and went through the process to extricate himself from the tumah, he acquires tahara. Tahara becomes part of him. He ends up higher off than he was before. That's the goal for the Metzora. That's what we're trying to do, what we're hoping he's going to get to. So now we come to the way in which he's treated. I spoke about it in another year, but it's a very key Shem Shmuel about this. When he comes and he brings his korban, among the things he brings is Eitz ha'erez ve'ezov u'shnitolas. He brings some cedar wood. He brings ezov, which they translate as hyssop. Some people say it's wild oregano. And you bring this red cloth, which is dyed with a dye that comes from a worm, shnitolas. And they're all wrapped up together. Okay, Rashi says that the Eitz ha'erez and the ezov are wrapped up in the shnitolas. Now, these represent things. The erez throughout Tanakh represents, in certain ways, arrogance, haughtiness. Right? Arzei halavonon, something very high. The ezov represents always something which is very low. And the shnitolas also represents the worm who is not high in the social rankings. So the question is, that's something he brings after he goes through his process, after he goes through his tahara. So if the erez represents gaiva, represents arrogance, if he's become tahar, meaning this is actually one of the rare cases a person can know he did tshuva properly, because the physical evidence changes. Okay, the Kohen can actually see you've become better. Why would he rub his nose into the fact that he was arrogant when he left that? Okay, and now he's humble like the Ezov and the Shnitolas. So the Shem Shmuel says, because after this person has got, so to speak, smashed so hard for what he's done and so publicly, he can end up falling into despair and falling into such low self-esteem, he'll become dysfunctional. He won't have the necessary simcha that a Jew needs to do mitzvahs. He won't have the strength and self-confidence that he needs to do what he has to do in life. So here, the Kohen and his friends have to help him repair and get the right balance. It's true, now that you've discovered this, and it's kind of like the Rambam says, sometimes if you go all the way, in one midah, you need to balance out some. And even though anova, humility, is one that we're supposed to go all the way, but still there's a certain level of self-esteem that the person is supposed to have. So therefore, right, he's supposed to see that this lowliness that you have now, the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has healed you and bringing you back into Kahal Yisrael, that should fill you with a tremendous feeling of strength, right? The proper strength, which is, even though I'm such a low person, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is welcoming me in. And that's the perfect blend, okay? And a person who has that lowliness is able to be raised up, right? It says, we say in davening, Mashpil geim u'magbia shfalim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu brings down the haughty and brings up the low. So I think it was the Chiddushim asked, wait a second, so that guy who's low, Hashem brings him up, and now he's going to be high, so then Hashem's going to bring him down, and he's going to be going on this constant roller coaster. So he says, no, Magbiya Shvalim means he takes a person who's humble, he raises him up, a person who remains humble even though he's up. That's what we're looking for. Okay, but he says it's very important, because there's a famous Zohar Kodesh that says that just as a person is held chayev and punished for mila bisha, for Lashon Hara that he says, so too he get punished for mila tova the ka'asi liyodeh. You have the opportunity to say a good word to somebody that helps them feel good, that helps encourage them, that helps heal them, that helps bring them simcha. If you don't say it, he says, then you're also held accountable for that. And sometimes also, and I'd be very, very careful with this, with what's called tochacha. Tochacha is poorly translated as rebuke or chastising. Really, it's an idea of demonstrating, clarifying for a person, right? Showing the person that something he's doing is wrong. If you are in the right situation, you have to always ask shilas before you do this. So you're also held accountable. If you don't tell your friend, listen, this is what you're doing here is something that's very negative. It's very bad for you. It's very bad for those around you. If you don't do that, you're held accountable for that as well. So he said, so here's the danger. If we smash this person, and let's be honest, especially if a person had high status and was looked up to, there's a certain satisfaction we get in him becoming a Metzora, and all right, let's see who's who, and he's back there with this, and wanting to rub his status into him, so to speak. And this process can make the person so weak that he won't be able to do anything. He may decide, I'm just not going to say anything. Look what happened to me from saying stuff. Okay, I don't trust myself anymore. I want to say something nice, but who knows? Maybe Hashem's going to call that Lashon Hara. I don't want to say anything. Yeah, I should really tell him to stop doing that. I'm not going to start with that, right? Because look what happened to me. Who am I anyway? Hashem showed that I'm a worm. Right? Basically, that's who I am. That's why you need the errors in there. The process is that the Kohen and those around him are supposed to help him explain that now that you've gone through this process, you've achieved something new. Now you're able to get things into balance. Now the milas that you have as an Adam won't destroy you. There's something that can come to benefit everybody else. And what's the protection? The lowliness that you went through. That fact that you were lowered through this, now it's going to give you the ability to have the simcha that you need, and that HaKadosh Baruch Hu enables you to do things for him. That's what's supposed to give you, so to speak, self-esteem. Not the fact that I'm better than this one and that, or I'm better in that. But the fact that despite who I am, HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes me and he gives me the mitzvahs to run the world. I was reading a piece this week by Rabbi Avram Grodzinski Zatzal. Hashem Yikom Domo. He was a mashgiach in the end, the Rosh Yeshiva of the Slobodki Yeshiva. After the Alter went to Hebron, and Rav Moshe Mordechai Epstein, and he wrote there, he says, in Psukei de Zimra, you got to realize what we do. Like when we say, Hallelu Shamayim V'aretz, Hallelu Kol Kol Chviyar, he says, that means you, a human being, are, so to speak, conducting the symphony of all creation singing to Hashem. He says, do you realize what that means for a person to be doing that? The Malachim don't say Shira until we say Shira, right? So that's who we are. We are able to do that. And that itself should humble us, right? While at the same time, it gives us the tremendous sense of simcha and elevation that we're able to do it. So this is the picture. This is what a person has to do with themselves. Everybody goes through times where HaKadosh Baruch Hu shows them the real picture, and sometimes it's very hard, and other people see, right, who you really are. And how a person is supposed to go through it, who you're supposed to go to, and to know that this is a process of chesed, as harsh as it seems, right? And those around are supposed to be there to help and encourage the person to go through the process, to come out better on the other side. And then that person should understand that now he brings far more to the table than when he was back in his arrogance before. Hashem help us. Yeah.